Hi, everyone. I'm Blaine Birch, co-founder and CEO at Dryrun, and welcome to Turning Point, Stories and Strategies from the World of Business. And joining me today is Bryan McIver from Vitruvi. Thanks for joining me, Bryan.
Glad to be here, Blaine.
So just a little background on Bryan and I. We're family through marriage, cousins, and all that sort of thing. So, and Bryan is one of the few, I think, actually, entrepreneurs in the extended family. So, of course, every time we get to a family reunion, we sit and talk business for pretty much the entire time, and don't visit with any family. So, anyway, thanks for joining me today, Bryan. You've done some really cool stuff, and we're both kind of in the software space today. So, I'm really glad you could join me.
Yeah, no, it's good to be here. And in fairness, we do have a number of farmers in the family, so. They're I guess all entrepreneurs in their own right, but you're right. Other than that, you and I are two of the few that have ventured out into entrepreneurship in the more traditional business sense.
That's very true. And I suppose I picture sometimes agriculture as business owners, and sometimes in my mind I separate sort of business owners with we're in tech. So, you get
That's
ingrained
right.
with this tech side, but you're right. And we talk with a lot of ag businesses, and it's a great market for us, and we love helping them because it's a complicated cash flow scenario for agriculture. So that's good point. But I'd like to sort of dive in, Bryan, because we've talked a lot about business. I know kind of a little bit about what you're working on now, but where did you get started in business? What was your first, step in?
Yeah, so I guess if I'm honest, my very first step into business would have been when I was in junior high school, and there was a bunch of, probably not too uncommon, there's a bunch of driveways that needed to be shoveled down the street, and so I got some jobs doing that. So that's obviously pretty common. Certainly not the first person to start my entrepreneurship journey shoveling driveways, at least in Canada. Yeah. But maybe what the different thing was I wasn't just kind of content to shovel the driveways. I took some COBOL code and built a little bit of a billing system to actually bill my clients. So probably, much more extra work than was really required to accomplish what needed to be done. But certainly I'd say that was a foundation for the rest of my life, which was when I came across a problem, turning to software to solve that.
Yeah. Okay. That's amazing. That's the first billing system built from scratch for shoveling driveways. That's a very cool start. And I'm not a coder by trade. I'm a designer by trade. So I always am a little mystified and amazed by coders. And of course, our CTO is the one that drives all the magic in our business. And so is it? So I'm guessing that's sort of your background. You went from there, like actually into coding as a career, or?
Yeah, and I'd say probably never. No, just to be clear, I never really went into coding as a career. I always took more the business route. But I guess I never wanted to be that kind of technologically inept business leader who actually couldn't solve some of the problems myself. Because as I look downstream, I think what I see is these kids that are coming out of school that are digital natives. They have to be able to do really entry-level coding for just day-to-day tasks. If you look at how you interact with devices, smartphones today, people are already doing what would have been coding 15 years ago. You're doing that as you configure applications. And so that's just becoming certainly second nature for being in business. And so, yeah, I was never a coder by trade, but I certainly always learned to be able to do some coding myself so I could solve some problems without having to turn to someone else. And that really, when I really started my entrepreneurship journey was right out of university, went into construction management for the utility space. And again, right away, as soon as I had a challenge as a project coordinator or a project manager, turned to, okay, I need to build a database for this, need to build some sort of software to automate this so that I can do what would normally take 2 or 3 people to do, I can do myself. And that's really where I started my entrepreneurship journey was in doing that. And then kind of just moved into, I think, the traditional and most simplest entrepreneurship step, which is take a trade, craft, or some sort of service, and then figure out how to monetize it. So there's a service people already know about. You're not introducing something new. You're just leveraging quality and leveraging your reputation to drive some business. And so, yeah, my first couple of businesses were really just around taking some sort of project management or construction skill or offering and building a little business around it.
Yeah. And it's a common, well, that's really where I started, was really in the service industry as well. And of course, design but a big part of our design was tech side. And I agree with you. I think like coding is such a fundamental skill. It's the new typing, I suppose. Like you just sort of have to know it. And I kid a little bit, but I actually was did some when Flash first came out. I was dove into ActionScript and made some little games, and eventually that led into some of our e-learning things, and we were building some sort of Flash-based projects. And then fortunately, I had much smarter staff than me that could actually build stuff correctly very soon. But it is a fundamental skill, and I agree with you, understanding the structure of it and the language and what it can do. It's not just magic beans. It's just you kind of understand how you can put things like that to use. And of course, that's how I guess I got into software as well. So the construction management. Tell me a little bit about like that business. So what exactly did you do, and how did that? I'm assuming that kind of laid a bit of a foundation for later on. What exactly did you do with that business? How did you grow it, and what were some of the fundamentals?
Yeah. So I actually kind of fell into construction management by accident. So when I got out of university, had my degree, and I was going to go look for a real job, and applying to corporate offices, the traditional kind of BCom route, which is you look at consultants and big corps and apply to the head office to be some sort of number cruncher business analyst of some way, shape or form. And but I put myself through university actually doing utility construction in the gas space. We're working practical gas, and so I thought, well, while I'm looking for my real job, I still need to pay the bills. So I went back to the utility space, and a contractor working for ATCO said, "Hey, can I come work for you while I'm looking for my real job?" And I explained a bit of my background, and the guy there said, "Sure." And so I got a job, on the end of a shovel, putting dirt in holes. And third day in, he rolled up in the truck and said, "Hey, why don't you grab your laptop and come to the office tomorrow?" So at that point, my laptop was the traditional student laptop, which was a desktop that I trundled around, and a monitor that I trundled around with. And I came to the office with my computer, and this company was just moving from traditional utilities into telecommunications, because that's just when that was just after the .com bubble had burst, but there was still a bunch of fiber and telecommunications construction going on. And so I started applying just basic project management practices and principles to the work that was going on there. And kind of got really hooked into being able to deliver results and solving these problems, and then becoming a bit of an expert in terms of the construction and engineering side associated with utilities. Mm-hmm. And I never really got away from that. So I never got my real job. And I did that for a number of years, and turned it into a consulting gig where I just build myself out as a day rate, but again was still basically a project manager for these projects. And then had a chance to go work for Ledcor. So me and this individual moved over to Ledcor, and that's a big name in construction in Canada, obviously one of the biggest and most successful diversified construction companies in Canada. And spent some time there. And then that was really when this, what we would call the revitalization of the last mile broadband networks. So pushing fiber that very last mile to really deliver these high speeds. That's really when that kicked off in North America. And I just happened to be at the right place in the right time, and got set down to some projects in the States where these networks were being built for the very first time, and had a chance to again figure that out from scratch. And we were building these networks where the big names on the planet were developing their technologies on our project. So Taiko was building their first materials and testing them on our projects, and Fujitsu was developing software and testing them on our projects. So really got a chance to be on the leading edge of that. And then at some point said, this is where I want to focus, and the leadership at my construction company was going a different direction. So I kind of stepped back and said, hey, I'm going to start my own consulting shop and just focus on this fiber to the home stuff. And then, just built a consulting practice around that. And about 3 years into that, there were some other folks that I'd been rubbing shoulders with in past years, doing construction work with, and they had a construction company, and they said, hey, we really want to bring together this kind of full package of project management and subcontracting and construction. And can we join forces? And so the three of us became partners and, built one of probably the more successful telecommunications subcontracting kind of turnkey construction companies in Western Canada. And and then 3 years later built that up to the point where we sold it to a large multinational. And that was really my journey in terms of I guess the first milestone in my entrepreneurship journey. But again, it really just came out of, pick a trade, pick a craft, and then scale it up. And it's easy because you have revenue from day one. You buy a bit of equipment, and you just scale it. Yeah, and that was really how I fell into that, Blaine.
So that's very familiar sort of path. Is similar in some ways to the one I took. And you hang your shingle out, but you're making money first day. You got revenue first day. You got profit first day, and not to say that that's easy. Like, I'm sure even the 6 years there, or even the 3 years as you grew that business there, I'm assuming there's some challenges in there. Like, what was your greatest challenge in that time leading up to when you actually sold that business?
I think relative to what I'm doing today, obviously it was far easier, but probably the biggest challenge was just, it's really the same challenge we have today, but it was cash management, but a different kind of cash management, right? Because we were up to about 150 employees, and that's a big payroll. And there was 2 times where I had to go to the bank and I had to transfer funds from my personal account so that we could cover payroll, right? And we had a big receivable, and we were a very successful business, but you get strung out when you're working for some of these big companies. We're working for TELUS. Like, TELUS receivables are, second only to the government of Canada, but at the same time, they will stretch you out. So I think those were probably just the biggest challenges, Blaine, but it was a solid business, and, we had the capacity to do that. And I just want to say, guys, this wasn't a pre-planned plug for cash management. that's the reality. That's why I got into, cash management, because, 2008, that's when, 2009, those are a little bit tough years for us. And I've done it's funny now, it's the digital walk, but I did the lonely real walk to the mailbox, hoping that the check was in there. And I could get it to the bank before we do payroll, and have done those transfers of cash while you're waiting on a big receivable. And, hopefully it's just late. And that was the one thing I kind of agree with you. Some of those big organizations were late, but at least you kind of knew you're going to get paid. Like you're doing government contracts, very likely you're going to get paid. It's just could be a long stretch. And, always a massive challenge there. But now you went from, again, like, your revenue profitable, probably almost first day service company. And of course there's challenges, there's ups and downs. And interestingly, sort of a similar path, I'm thinking it's probably the same as mine, where I thought I knew way more than I did, and went into software as a service, where you are putting a pile of cash out at the start, hoping to make it back later, not realizing how big the pile of cash was going to be and how long the trudge was going to be. And how did you make that transition? What got you this idea where you said, I'm going to dive into something that's a product-based venture? Yeah, that's a great question. Like, and to be honest, when we sold the company, and I went to work for the acquirer, I didn't even know what product management was. Right? I'd heard the term, and I was in the world of project management, and never even gave a second thought to product management, not realizing that's actually the fundamental underpinnings of basically the world's economy is actually products. But anyways, so how did I make that leap? I mean, it was really kind of twofold. So obviously, number one, we had a really great exit, and went to work for this acquirer, and I actually moved to Vancouver with my family because that's where their head office was, and we just had a blast living out there, and went from running a team of 150. I was actually the president of our construction company, to ended up moving to overseeing about 500 folks building these large construction projects. And so anyways, I'd proven track record in being able to deliver projects on time, on budget, and make a bunch of money and drive margins for owners. But the new challenge there was to say, hey, let's scale this business up. And as we scaled our business up from a revenue perspective, we just noticed that the back office costs, there was just no leverage, right? And them really begin to take a look and say, there is not really good products and good technologies put to work in these in managing construction. And then found out that construction was the least digitized industry on the planet, and there's just tons of waste, and everything's over budget, and everything's delayed and late, and had said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And thought, hey, well, I could finish my gig up here and go and start another construction company and do this all over again, but there's a bigger problem here that needs to be solved. And so I said, hey, we've obviously got some cash, and the acquirer has a need here. So they've got a ton of cash. It's a $120 billion market cap, and
a little bit of cash,
yeah. And I said, hey, let's go do something different, right? I don't want to just run another services company and do something that everyone can do. Let's try something hard. And so it was really those two things: having a bit of financial capacity, and then having a challenge that I'd lived the customer problem for almost 15 years, and said, hey, there's a huge opportunity here. We've got some background to solve it, and it's probably worth the risk because the prize is pretty big. And that's kind of how we got started.
Yeah. When did you start Vitruvi?
Yeah, we started it it started as a kind of a concept in January of 2016. I was still working for my previous employer, and talking with my boss about how I could best serve this employer, and said, hey, there's a problem here that needs to be solved. Maybe I should go off and solve this outside of this company. And then we started a project called Project Lighthouse, and that was over the course of the spring of 2016, and then started putting the pieces together. And I guess September 20th, 2016 is when I stepped down from my role, and we incorporated, at that time, we incorporated what was called just a numbered company, Project Lighthouse, and then went through a process, and the parent company that we have is called Fresnel Software. And then we have a product called vitruvi, but yes, we just talk about it as vitruvi to keep it simple for everybody. And that would have been in the fall of 2016.
Okay, so interesting. We launched our kind of our MVP, I guess it was in 16, but we had a prototype before that. So I've been struggling a little a touch longer, I suppose. So tell me a little bit about what was the difference in process for you setting up a business, and how did you get started on a product side where you understand the problem intimately, but how did you dive into a product dev side? What were some of the, I guess, big learnings and some of the processes you took to actually take on something that wasn't necessarily super familiar?
Yeah, no, great question. Because I did have a background in terms of my prior careers. As I said, I always turned to software, and for our construction company that I ran, I was a president. I also, off the side of my desk, built this little database piece of software in SQL and Microsoft Access that was kind of one of the reasons we were acquired, but it was still a pretty crummy little piece of homegrown software. And so I certainly had some experience, and I had done that type of work and knew a bit about, at least I thought I knew a bit about building, software products. But luckily, and I don't really think it's luck, I'm actually a person of faith, so I don't believe in luck and chance, but I happened to just have this kind of freak connection with who became my co-founder, and it's actually a friend that I had known through some of my my sister and her friend, and he had actually a deep background in building software products in the enterprise space. And yeah, so anyways, very, very interesting story. Won't go into to it here, but yeah, he came alongside, and really I kind of handed off the whole product management piece to him from day one, and just spoke into the product requirement side. And then he had a super talented architect that he also brought over from some prior projects, and this is someone that helped build things like the .NET platform. So we had some horsepower in the product and development side, Blaine. But really, to answer your question, I did it by stepping out of the way and putting some qualified folks in there.
Yeah.
And to be clear, I have never touched a line of code in the product that we have, which is a little bit different from a lot of SaaS founders. Most of them do get involved in from day one in terms of some of the coding. And yeah, we just everything that we were working on, all the technologies and the tech stack was well beyond certainly what I'd ever had experience with. So
yeah, and it's I think you hit on something that's really, really important when, especially for a tech startup. That's the same learnings that I have had is it is all about team, but when the stakes are that high and the team is that small, they have to be outstanding, right? And that's yeah. I feel sort of the same way, that it's do I call luck, or is there there's also a lot of work finding the right people. There's a lot of observation and knowing what you need to some degree, but that team makes all the difference. Like having really good, like for our team, it's a very senior team, and that was the opposite. Sometimes I think of what some people will think of like a tech startup is you get a bunch of young people in the back corner of a room. I've had a lot more success with, I get senior superstars, and not a lot of them, but get them in and work together as a team and deal with the culture. If you have a really great culture and everyone's on the same page and the same goals and the same vision, because it's hard, you have those days when you feel like you're skyrocketing, and then the next day it feels like you skyrocketed right into the ceiling. It's a little bit of how it goes. So, what is your, like right now in Vitruvi, what would you say? I'm going to ask a two-part question here. What is your, I guess, biggest aha moment or biggest leap forward, the biggest like thing that you're really excited about and really proud of? And conversely, what has been that biggest challenge since 2016? What is the one thing that's just been a little bit of a that the big tough thing that's kind of kept you awake at night?
Yeah, I'll start off with the second part, because obviously from a sequential perspective that comes first. And so the biggest challenge is ironically something we identified right at the very outset, but we didn't fully understand the magnitude of that challenge. And what that challenge was to build what we were building, which was a bit of a category creation, and in building end-to-end enterprise SaaS, really requires it certainly requires guinea pigs, and that's very it's easy to do it with we had a joke as we built the product. We always refer to a dog walking app, right? Like there's these single solution apps that you can just, the world's your oyster. You can find at least one or two idiots on the planet that will try your app with you and give you some feedback. It's not that case that's not the case when you're building enterprise SaaS, right? To find an entire company that's going to put their operations on their brand new platform, it's just impossible. So the only way to do it is actually to start with a strategic investor, someone who's got a vested interest to actually make it happen. But all that to say, we knew from day one our biggest challenge would not be this hairy all the hair around trying to figure out the technical solution of this fully integrated end-to-end solution. We knew that would be a big challenge, but the bigger challenge would be change management, right? Even if we had a great solution, to get the folks in the construction industry are late majority adopters at best, and more likely they're just laggards. Yeah. And so change management was always going to be the issue. And so we de-risk that by bringing in a strategic from day one and say, hey, put in some capital. We're going to build a solution that you can leverage across the entire industry. And you're going to bring your team to the table to actually help us and be that guinea pig. And that was just so much more complex, so much harder, and so much more stressful than we ever imagined. Because in a big organization like that, you've got the CEO at the top that's bought in, but 3 levels below him is a team that actually has to get on board, and they may not be on board, right? And so that was I just did not have any concept about how much hair would be on that part of it. But it's been good because we learned a whole bunch of things for our other real customers or our non-strategic investor customers that had many of the same challenges, right? So they that was, I think, probably the biggest challenge and hurdle to overcome.
Before you go on to the sort of the next step here, I'd like, it's interesting because we've been working sort of from the bottom up. We started with sort of direct to business and a little bit smaller businesses. Now a big channel for us are CPA firms, and the businesses we tend to target are multi-million-dollar businesses. And that change management side is something that we've been learning. And it's exactly what you said, is it's not just change management for us, but we're also trying to help our partners figure out that problem themselves as well. And I'm just curious, how did you so you got that which is the common, you get someone at the top says, yeah, let's do this. What were some of the tactics you used to actually get that buy-in, get that champion a few steps down, so that you could actually start getting some traction there?
Yeah, I think, so first of all, just to kind of, walk you through our process. When we started the company, we started with I had someone on the team originally who had a deep background in organizational strategy, organizational change, coaching, and just helping companies do kind of big strategic organizational structuring. That was really this individual's background. Zero technology background, no background in construction, and this individual helped us build great culture, and then also helped us kind of approach change management, taking a very academic approach, Cotter's eight dynamics or key forces in change management, and so I think we took a very, what I would say is like an academic and a very thoughtful approach to change management, and I wouldn't say it fell flat, but it certainly was almost a little bit too academic, and our customers were much more like just meat and potatoes. We just need some quick results. And so learned a few things there, but I would say it was not that successful. And obviously the product was in its very early stages, so it was tough to get engagement that way. And honestly, I think the epiphany for us and or maybe not to get to the epiphany just yet, but in terms of what we saw started to turn, that was really just in terms of actual users, it was really just them seeing their needs brought into the product, right? So again, we tried all sorts of fancy things like, hey, let's get them engaged in meetings, let's try to incentivize them, let's get them t-shirts, let's do all these things to get their buy-in. And really the only way that they actually got buy-in was if they said something and then they saw it in the product. And that was kind of and then we obviously built on that as much as we could. But and the other challenge too was with an end-to-end product, vertically integrated SaaS. I don't care if it does 90 things, or 90% of the person's job better. If there's 10% of the job that it doesn't do, they just focus on the 10%, right, and forget about everything else. And that was one of the things that I think did surprise us. We had this view that, hey, if we can come in and overall give you a net 80% uplift in your productivity, you'll take it, even though there's extra work in a couple other steps. And we just didn't see that it didn't matter if there was millions of dollars of savings on the table, just the way things were. If they couldn't get to these things that were, their soapbox or their pet peeve, then they wouldn't see any value. And I think that was that was a big challenge. And so another strategy that we used to overcome that was actually just to make them sit down and do an actual value proposition analysis and recognize that, yes, steps 2 and 3, they have to put in more effort, but steps 4 through 20, we were saving them 100 times the effort, right? And really got them thinking, oh yes, it is really, really worth that.
Yeah. It's interesting. That's great insight, because we've had, it's not just us. Like we had the same sort of challenge, right? It's like, yeah, we just saved you like, 30 days this month. Yes, it takes an hour or whatever, right? Like it's, you get some of that, and it's something that we've, we're always trying to figure out. There's the product side, but a lot of it is it's the engagement, onboarding. How do we do this? And sort of similar to you, I think we have taken a little bit sometimes in the past, a little bit of the same approach, where it's maybe a little bit too complicated, a little bit too academic, a little bit too overthought. And sometimes it is just a simple solution, and simple communication can carry the ball a long way for you. So it's interesting insight, because it's always a challenge, that adoption side.
Yeah. And it's I mean, that's a great segue into what our kind of, I'd say I don't know if it's our epiphany, but it's certainly what really has really changed the dynamic is, when frontline users get that engagement, that's really what changes everything. So it's very interesting. We see this dynamic where the C-suite gets it, and they love the benefits of what this platform can do for their business, but their teams are so focused on, from a change management perspective, building a better today, and we always talk about building a better tomorrow, right? And even it's not even building a better today, to be fair, it's building a better yesterday, right? So their teams are saying, well, here's my 5 steps in the current construct. Well, in a better tomorrow, 3 of those go away because technology has changed your process, and they're still looking for those missing 3 steps. And until they see them, they think that they haven't, crossed the chasm in terms of the product can help them. And they need to just realize that those 3 steps are never going to be there. They're actually handled in a different way in this new technology ecosystem. And so don't be so fixated on them, right? Again, we're not building a better yesterday, we're building a better tomorrow. And that's, and that can be hard for teams to get their minds around. But once they do get their minds around that, and we even have an example of this where executive sponsors were saying, hey, we just want to slow things down a bit until a couple of more of these features are in the platform. And the whole frontline team said, there's no way we're ever going back to the old process. We don't care if there's a bit of friction here. This is the future. And this actually does save us overall, even though the early steps cause us a bit more pain. So yes, we have to spend an extra 2 or 3 hours on steps 1 and 2. Steps 3 through 10 are much, much faster and save us hundreds of hours.
Yeah. And
we are never going back to the other way. So that was, I think, just a very interesting and obviously very satisfying moment for the team to actually see. We always felt this needed to be very much driven top down and led top down, but to see the anchor really coming from those frontline users. Yeah.
It's you need both. You need buy-in from the top, but you definitely, if you can't get the engagement at the front line, it's not going to go anywhere. And it's so much what you're talking about is this is a familiar challenge as we go through every day, but it is neat when you see those successes and you see that aha moment. And the thing that we've always found, that I've been sort of fascinated by, is sometimes you can be up to a wall and you're stuck there for a bit, and it feels like it's this, and it's a little bit, but it's like that proverbially talk about the tipping point. That just seems to be what happens is just this little last 10 yards. And it flips over and starts that momentum going down the other way. And it's kind of a fascinating thing. And we look at that now, and sometimes like, man, we're really fighting this, but you know what? It feels like we're so close to just flipping this over.
Yeah. In Good to Great, the author talks about that flywheel, and at some point that flywheel just starts to go, right? And that's that tipping point where it just starts to accelerate and really takes over, or really takes off, I should say.
Yeah, it's this is really interesting. I think we've been talking for quite a while here, so I really enjoyed the conversation. But what I'd like to do is actually, how do people get hold of you if they want to, check out what you're doing? Give us a little bit more of a summary of who is your, perfect customer. How can you help them, and how do they find you?
Yeah. So again, first of all, there's a ton of project management solutions on the web, right? Everything from Monday.com, who even, tries to advertise in our space, right through to the Procores, and of course the big ERPs have all been dipping their toe in the space for the past number of decades. So just in terms of clarity, in terms of what we do, so we're focused on horizontal infrastructure or utility construction. So not building buildings and not building homes, but building utility infrastructure, which you think pipes and cables, right? And obviously the big push right now is around cables. It's all about broadband, but there's a whole bunch of aspects of utility infrastructure that are going to continue to be built and overbuilt and rebuilt. The power grid's about to be overbuilt as we change sources of energy, and just a ton of these utility infrastructure projects that are going to continue to take off with capital investment. So number one, that's our focus, and it's got a very different challenge from building a building, which you walk through the same gate, the same job shack, the same you're limited to the same square block or the same couple thousand square feet every day for your project, as opposed to building large utility infrastructure where you're spread out across a city or a state or even an entire country, and you're managing resources in all those places, but you still need to have the same types of reporting and statusing efficiencies. And so we're focused on the geospatial challenge, the infrastructure that goes out. That's our focus. And our customers are the firms that really carry the risk for delivering those projects on time and on budget. And that really comes down to two categories. It's either the network owner, where the network owner wants to manage their own construction, or where the construction is typically outsourced to a large construction general contractor, or engineering, procurement, and construction, an EPC. Then it's the EPC firm who has the risk, who's our customer. So that's who we sell to. And really the key differentiator between us and these other platforms like the Monday.coms and even the Procores or the N8s or whatever, and the SAPs is that we have, and we're really pioneering this, are really the first ones to actually bridge the geospatial design elements with the rest of the construction and project management. Because typically you see a silo for engineering, someone designs something over here and they pitch it over the fence to construction and now go build that. And there's a lot of inefficiencies built into that because changes in design have to be essentially manually updated in the rest of the project management stack. And so every time there's a change, doesn't matter if it's a change in engineering or if it's a change during construction to the engineering and to the design, there's all this spreadsheets and bubble gum that goes into kind of managing all these different changes. And in a perfect world, those should be seamlessly integrated. So the elements that I'm building, I should only have to instantiate that line, that point, that shape once, and all the dynamic points and data around that should naturally flow through to have schedules and budgets, all flex in real time with actual APIs and not human APIs. And that's really what we're doing, Blaine, is we've got a platform that does that. There's only a couple other folks that are actually in that space, and we appear to be emerging as the leader on a number of fronts, which is great for us. But also, given that that's so new and it's very it's a big change for our customers, that's where the big change management piece comes in. So, anyways, that's what we do. That's what makes us different, and that's the value that we add. And again, we typically sell to large construction companies, but given that it's software, you can spool up the servers on Amazon for $1 billion company, or you can spool them up for a $2 million company. It really doesn't matter. And so we do have some smaller customers too. And people can get to us at vitruvi.cc, vitruvi.cc.
All right, terrific. And it sounds like, not just a time saver, but I can see that as a big mess up saver too, because what happens when you have multiple versions and multiple copies of the same document and everything else. I can just barely imagine, even though I'm not in that space. So
yeah, it's actually it's about 30% of the cost of a construction project. Once you package it all up and you get all the numbers in one place, it's about 30% of the cost is associated with these inefficiencies.
Wow.
By people, doing rework, extra what we call truck rolls, hunting for information, having to, spend all the time doing all these extra status reports. So it's a huge cost of construction. And, really what we see as our mission for the world is that we need to build so much more of this infrastructure. Society is addicted to infrastructure and they need it. But obviously, as we can all appreciate, there's fewer and fewer dollars to necessarily go around. So we need to help stretch that out. So whatever people can build for, the US has just put $16 billion into funding for broadband networks, and that 16 billion can build X, or it can build 2X or 3X with more efficiencies and more technology. And that's really where we want to add value to the planet, is allowing those infrastructure dollars to go farther. Yeah.
Well, thanks. Yeah. Thanks so much, Bryan. This was a really great conversation. I learned a lot. I always love these conversations. Sometimes I selfishly dig into, how did you guys do that? Because I want to know, and I'm sure other people listening, especially in SaaS, are interested in the same thing. So I really enjoyed our conversation today. And as usual, everyone, if you're looking for some help with your cash flow management and scenario modeling, please come check us out at dryrun.com. We'd love to talk with you. Thanks again, Bryan. It was just a terrific conversation.
Thanks again, Blaine. Good to chat.